I uh, I I really do believe that if you are not a contrarian, you will be a victim. I really do believe that if you are fully invested in dollars, you're destined to go broke. And I want people to know that when I talk about gold and silver, it is never, ever, ever, and go back and listen to anything I've said for the past decade on YouTube's or on any speech I've ever done. Gold is not an investment. Silver is not an investment. It may perform like one, may make you wealthy, but what they are wealth. When you see the most well-funded, well-informed, influential traders on the planet accumulating the stockpile of metal that they are, when you see a company like JP Morgan, who paid a $920 million fine to the Justice Department for suppressing gold and silver, when you see the most sophisticated, well-informed, influential traders on the planet massively accumulating metals and de-dollarizing, whether it be the US commercial banks or the foreign central banks, when you see the rise of the others, the most influential and well-informed private traders draining the London Metals Exchange, draining the COMEX, when you see gold reclassified tier one, when you see all of these countries coalescing, when you see all the 13 OPEC producing countries on the Belt Road, the US isn't part of it. When you see 200 countries at the IMF from around the world say we want a new system, why did they choose gold as a tier one reserve asset? Why not special drawing rights from the IMF? All of these things put together in and of themselves, okay, put them all together and look at it as a sphere, and you can see the dollar screwed. You can see the West is living on borrowed time. And you can see they are putting everything together right now. You can see something that they just did called the M Bridge. The M Bridge is a new technology that allows cross-border payment of central bank digital currencies. It was just done by China, I think Singapore, and the United Arab Emirates. It was like a 40-day test, and it worked. And now all of it sidesteps the intermediary banks of the West or SWIFT. Think about it for a moment. You have more money created in the past 3 years than in the history of the country combined. You have over 50% of every dollar ever created in the last 3 years in the history of the country. 50% over of every dollar ever created in the history of this country was done in the last 3 years. And where did all that money go? Went into assets that got blown sky high: stocks, bonds, real estate, cryptos. And they're all inversely correlated to what? A rise in interest rates. So I'm just going to throw this out there before I continue. What would happen if Saudi Arabia just decided to say, hey, we're no longer going to sell oil just for dollars, and every country on the planet dumped dollars because every country on the planet has had to own it to buy oil for the last 50 years, and now they don't anymore? Well, what if they all start to dump dollars as it becomes a hot potato? Dollars come home, creating hyperinflation, interest rates go to the moon, and what happens to everyone who thinks they're wealthy in stocks, bonds, and real estate? It's the Great Reset. It's the setup for the Great Reset. But let me make it even a little bit worse for you as we talk about what's happened in 2022, and we can, I think, see that this is indeed happening. When you are the steward of the world reserve currency, it is not your job to tell who can and who cannot use it. And by weaponizing it, it has incentivized the majority of the world to move away from the US dollar, to find an alternative source of clearing and not using the SWIFT system. Because countries like China, who have sold treasuries for the past 8 months in a row, 150 billion in treasuries, they're not buying them anymore. Japan's not buying them. Saudi Arabia is not buying them. Russia's not buying them. All of these countries are selling treasuries. Why? Because they're thinking, are we next? If we go after Taiwan, are we next? Saudi Arabia is saying, if we join the BRICS nations, are we next? All of these countries, I believe, look at the US as hypocritical, look at the Western hegemony as something that they would love to break free from, but they've never had the ability to do it. These countries are not strong enough militarily or GDP. Their economies aren't strong enough. They need the US until they don't. There was just an article by Reuters just the other week and Bloomberg, and it said that the central banks bought a record 399 tons of gold worth over 20 billion in the third quarter of this year, 2022. 340% higher than Q3 2021, almost double the previous record of 241 tons in Q3 2018. Also marks the 8th consecutive quarter of net purchases and lifts the year-to-date total of 673 tons. And that's higher than any full year since 1967, and there's still a few weeks left to go in the year. But Bloomberg called the buyers of all of this gold and silver mystery whales. And they postulated that the mystery whales buyers were likely either China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, or India. Bloomberg is saying, we don't know who bought it all, but we think this is who it is. And they also noted that the central bank purchases were nearly double the previous record. So what do all of these countries have in common? Yes, they're BRICS. But what was interesting about that was that of the 400 tons delivered, only 120 tons were they knew where it went. The other 2/3 of it, they just knew it left the country and was going that way. And they surmised that's who's buying it. So you are seeing massive drawdowns, huge amounts being drawn down off the exchanges. And it's a one-way street, because once it leaves COMEX, it's lost its liquidity. So when you talk about these deliveries, these massive drawdowns in metals, it's been happening since I started talking about the others in 2020. It has not stopped. In fact, it's increased massively. And who's been buying more gold than at any time since 1967? Oh yeah, the central banks. Well, why are they buying gold and silver? Oh yeah, gold's tier 1 reserve asset, and everyone's moving away from the dollar. And do you see how all of these things start to come together? And
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and so the bottom line is that I think we often take the dollar's reserve status for granted, simply because we've grown up under this system. But the truth is that reserve currencies come and go every 100 years or so. And the dollar was the only choice when we moved to a full fiat currency system because of Bretton Woods and the trillions of dollars that had all been circulating globally. But I think that we are looking at a period of time right now where these countries are beginning to break away and accentuate themselves against the centuries old Western dominance. And I think the handwriting is on the wall. We will wake up at some point, probably sooner than later, to a new system that will challenge the dollar for its world reserve. And God forbid Saudi Arabia and OPEC say the dollar's done as the only settlement currency for oil. They're already selling it to China for the yuan denominated bond.